Hey guys, welcome back to the Bond Report. My name is Chris, aka the Beard of Blofeld. So, jumping right in today, we are going to be talking about The Hook and the Eye. That's right, Raymond Benson's new book. It's been all over the place all summer long. He's been doing ebook releases, he's been doing physical signing releases. Today, we're going to be talking with the man himself, of course. We're going to be talking about plot design, we're going to be talking about location choices, character development, and at the end, I have a very special question for Raymond that he doesn't know about. And then we're going to kind of see maybe what's inside for the future of Felix and this whole kind of book series, if it's going to be one or not. So stick around to the end. You're going to want to hear that. But without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce the man himself, Raymond Benson. Welcome to the channel again.
Hello, Chris, and hello, everybody in podcast land.
Good to see you again. I think I said this when you first joined, but I absolutely love the background. And for anybody who's read the book, you'll appreciate that as well.
Right. Well, spoiler alert, it is Carlsbad Caverns, New Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a location in the book, a very major location. So
Yes.
I thought it'd be fun to have this as a background.
Perfect. And we are going to be touching on a few small spoilers. I'm not going to give away the ending of the book today, so I want people to know that at home. And because there are going to be some things we're going to talk about. If you haven't read the book, potentially consider reading the book first and coming back to this video. But we will not be spoiling the end of it, just so you're aware. I got to tell you, man, I mean, I've been excited about this book all year long. I know we spoke last and I hadn't got my hands on it. The ebook thing was kind of working. There was some episodic things getting released on Fleming.com. They tried, but I don't think that was the fault of you or Fleming.com. I think that was the third party they had struggles with, right?
Yes, yes, it was all the retailers like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and whoever distributed the ebooks. They all had different methods of updating their files, and they often didn't work. So
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of frustrated people. I mean, some people it worked just fine, and they got the update and it was fine. But there were too many people that just couldn't get it the update, and and you tried all kinds of things like shutting down your device or restarting it, and doing all kinds of stuff, calling customer service and trying to get them to push it through and all that. Finally, IFP just decided, hey, we don't need this headache. Let's just release it. And so that's what happened at the end of June.
Yeah.
They just dispensed with the serial, which was a fine idea. But I had no problem with that idea, that concept of doing sort of a serial pulp thing.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. So they released the ebook, and so everybody who reads ebooks got to read it over the summer. And now the book is available exclusively for now from IFP.
And I loved how you were doing the episodic kind of behind the scenes clips on YouTube with them. I actually did watch all of those. I watched the final episode last night as I was wrapping up the book itself last night because I've had my copy now for I don't know, about 2.5 weeks. And I was finally I didn't want to have this conversation too far away from me finishing the book so that it was still very fresh on my mind.
Yeah, those videos. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you watched them because I have no idea who watched them or if anybody watched them. But they were fun to record, and of course they were meant to be dropped along with the serial.
Right.
So after the fact, I'm not sure how well they worked out of context of the serial. It's like if you watch an HBO series or a Netflix series, at the end of the episode, you might see a little short video. Now let's go behind the scenes of the
Right.
episode. And they have people talking about, the actors or the director or the writer talking about that episode. So that was the concept behind doing this.
Well, I love the concept. I wish more authors would do that because it really does help create that connection between the reader and the author themselves. And of course, it gives a little insight into some of the story, the backstory of why certain things happened, why certain decisions were made to either go to locations, names, things like that. So I enjoyed it. And I hope that for your next project, it's something that you revisit.
Or we just don't do that.
or we just don't do that. That is also the other option. All right, well, let's start this conversation with the title. Obviously, The Hook and the Eye. It's a clever, it's layered, it suggests both physical and metaphorical meaning here. Explain to everyone at home, what does that duality represent to you as the author when flushing out the rest of the story?
Well, I mean, at this point in Felix Leiter's life, I mean, I did set it in Fleming's timeline, so I am using Ian Fleming's
Right.
Felix Leiter, definitely. And he, after Live and Let Die, after he got his arm and part of his leg chewed off by a shark, he is basically kicked out of the CIA, and he has to get a job at Pinkerton's. Pinkerton's detective agency. So he becomes a private eye.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a hook and he had in the eye. And the slogan for Pinkerton's was the eye that never sleeps.
Mm.
So the hook and the eye. That's
Yeah.
kind of where it came from. Interestingly, though, I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you this. I've revealed it before. My very first attempt at a novel, way back in the 1980s, was about a private eye with a prosthetic,
Hmm.
and was not Felix Leiter. It was nowhere like Felix Leiter or anything. But that I was interested in that because I have a nephew who was born without a right hand. So I created this other character. I mean, maybe Felix was kind of churning around in the back of my mind, but I knew at that time I couldn't write a Felix Leiter novel. So I kind of created my own, and he was a private detective in Texas. And I called that novel Hook and Eye Inc.
Huh.
Incorporated. So that was the name of his agency, Hook and Eye Inc. Well, like all first novels, or not all first novels, but most first novels, it's the kind you put in a drawer and keep it there
I was
or
going to
bury
ask
it.
you. Yeah, you mentioned that the last time we spoke. I was wondering if that was the novel that got put in the drawer.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Wonderful.
I did show it to Peter Jansen Smith of Ian Fleming Publications. Actually,
Mhm.
at the time, it was called Glidrose Publications. And he read it and he gave me some good comments. And I think him seeing this book kind of put in the back of his mind that I could start a novel and, more importantly, finish it. And so a few years later, he asked me to write James Bond novels. So anyway, coming to the title of this, I remembered that title, and I didn't want to do the same title. Of course, the incorporated doesn't make sense. So I did a little play on it and called it The Hook in the Eye. And um, I actually think it's a little more Fleming-esque sounding.
Yes.
Um, he almost called the For Your Eyes Only collection the rough with the smooth.
Well, I got to tell you, man, this one you knocked it out of the park. I got to probably the last, I want to say, like 12 chapters, and you took me right back into your Union trilogy style of writing, with the twists and the turns and just the way certain people played off of each other and the way you lead the reader sometimes. Really, really enjoyed the depth on this one. And that kind of brings me into my next question here, because obviously as we move into this year, we're in 2025 and beyond, bringing classic espionage to modern readers. Obviously this is quite a few years after your main six Bond novels. Spy fiction today leans towards high tech gadgets, fast pacing, but The Hook in the Eye feels a lot more grounded, like in human intelligence. Atmosphere was really big in this novel. Moral gray areas. How did you approach writing espionage that feels timeless, especially for the modern readers in 2025?
Well, I'm always been a big fan of noir, and the kind of books that say, James M. Cain and Raymond Chandler and especially Jim Thompson would write in the 40s and 50s. It's a sort of hard boiled, very dark, almost gritty. edgy, cynical. And I'm also a big fan of film noir movies, the movies, film noir. Um, and I even taught a class on it. So I kind of wanted to do a sort of the equivalent of a film noir in the world of Bond. Only it stars Felix and not Bond.
Right.
And the fact that he's a
Success.
private eye lends itself to that, really.
I would agree. I think you nailed it when it comes to the noir feeling of the book, and especially with like the cover art. I mean, that kind of leads you in to think,
Yeah.
wait a minute, this might be a little bit left of what we're used to. And I know even like with your, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was the Black Stiletto stuff that had a noir kind of element to it, did it not?
In a way. I mean, it took place in two time periods. It was in the late 50s, early 60s, and in the modern day. So, yeah, maybe the early stuff was kind of noir, a bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
And for those who don't know what the Black Stiletto is, that's another series that Raymond has been writing for quite a while. Like you wrapped it up, didn't you? Are you
Oh, yeah, it's only it's five books.
okay? Yeah,
And it tells one complete story over the five books. Even
right.
though you can, they're like Harry Potter. You can experience one book, but to experience them all in order, you get the full story, the full arc.
Right.
You know.
I gotcha. I gotcha. I feel like with this one, as I was reading through it, the tone was really, especially in the beginning. I want to say like the New York settings, they were really kind of gritty. Was that by design to help fuel that noir feel?
Sure, sure, yeah. And if you see a lot of film noir or read a lot of these books, they either take place in New York or L.A. Mostly. I
Right.
mean, yeah. I mean, there are some that take place out in the country or in Texas or somewhere like that. But most of these famous books, are in New York or L.A. The big
Yeah.
city, um, urban potboilers.
Yeah. I was gonna say I can immediately just see like dark, smoky alleys, trench coats, cigarettes being lit in a
Smoking,
corner.
smoking and drinking, bars,
Yep.
shady bars,
Right.
loose
Sh-
women.
yeah. Shady characters. What's he
Yeah,
holding behind his back? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So,
Well,
yeah, I mean, he's a private eye who's investigating, a possible murder or whatever, and he falls into basically a spy plot,
mm-hmm.
and so his CIA stuff mind has to kick in as well. Um, but his hands are kind of tied in that regard because he's no longer with the CIA.
Yeah. And that's a weird balance that we see him going back and forth between his contacts, especially now knowing what I know. It's interesting to see the dynamics. I'm gonna end up reading it again to catch things I know I missed the first time around.
There are
So
definitely little hints and foreshadowings and
let's talk about one of the fun things that was foreshadowing for sure. And this is kind of a spoiler, but I don't feel like it's not a major plot story spoiler. This is just a fun thing that you incorporated. Uh, Now I know from watching those episodes we talked about on YouTube that were supposed to go along with the serials, you kind of based some of the maybe the success of Leiter and Felix himself off of, was it your nephew who also is an opera singer who is also,
he's my relative who was born without a right hand. Well,
yes,
I mean, I not necessarily really. I mean, I put him in the book. I mean, that's Weston Hurt who gives him a ride toward the end of the book.
yes,
The character that Leiter's hitchhiking along the highway.
mm-hmm.
And I stuck Weston Hurt in. Yeah, he's an opera singer and doing very well too. That was just a nod, nudge, nudge, wink, wink to my family.
Well, I thought that was a really cool piece because that's one of those little personal touches that you didn't have to give that up in that serial. And that's the fun thing about the serials I kind of come back to is you do talk about these personal elements. And I do hope that when and if you do another book, you continue on with those because I really did enjoy them.
Well, thank you. Felix is a Texan and I am a Texan. I feel like I really know this guy. I mean, we're of different eras, generations. He was an adult in the 40s and 50s. I'm was born in the 50s.
Right.
So I'm sure we would have different world outlooks, but I think we would have I would recognize his personality. I mean, because I knew men like him
Yeah.
in Texas. And I can just hear him talk. I can hear him. That's one reason why. I mean, I don't like to denigrate any of the film Felix Leiters. They're all fine actors, but I've never felt like we've ever seen Ian Fleming's Felix Leiter on the screen ever.
No.
We've never really had, the closest to me was Rick Van Nutter.
Mm,
He at least looks like how he's described in the books.
yeah.
But I don't know if he's a Texan. You can't really tell he's a Texan, and he certainly doesn't have a prosthesis. Um, but he has kind of the right attitude. He's supposed to, he's kind of a goofball, especially to Bond. He's all, if you read all those scenes with Bond in the books,
Yeah.
he's always like very upbeat and like trying to entertain Bond. He's like
Yeah.
he's trying to entertain him.
Yeah.
We're gonna go out to this restaurant and oh, here's the menu. I want you to order this, this, and this, and you're gonna love it.
Yeah.
This drink is what you need to have here, and all this kind of thing. He's like the tour guide for America for
Yes.
Bond. He's either way too serious in the movies,
Yeah.
or he's just kind of a blank slate,
Yeah.
you know.
And that's a shame because there is a lot of opportunity there. It wouldn't, I don't feel like it would impact the pacing at all to just craft him as the character that Fleming and now you have written him to be, because
Right.
there is so much more depth in that character that they're just leaving on the table. And
Yeah.
I feel like when you're crafting a movie like that, part of the story, the more details you can get, the more you're selling the scene, the more you're giving the audience to go back and appreciate, whether it's that first, second, third, or 20th time they watch the film. So, but one of the other things you brought up about Felix was in his prosthetic leg, you also give him a special little hidden gift. You want to tell everybody what that gift is?
You mean the weapon?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, I just thought, okay, this is a Bond universe, so why not have hidden secret weapons? So he has when his leg prosthesis is being made, he asked the guy, "Hey, can you put a little secret compartment in it? I can stick, the little dagger that I got from my father uh, in it and just have it there. It'd be a nice little contraption. And of course, the rules are in Bond universe. If something is introduced early in the story, then it's going to be used later on in the story.
Yep. Foreshadowing.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So tell me about that dagger though, like, because I'm reading it and I'm thinking like the size of his leg, and I'm trying to imagine. Part of me is like, okay, I'm like, is this like a pirate dagger that's got like a full knuckle piece with spikes on it, and like the blade is this long?
It's a 6-inch trench dagger, very thin, lightweight. So yeah, it would have to be, the compartment would have to be big enough to hold it.
Great piece though. That's exactly what I was thinking. I enjoyed that piece because I personally thought this is kind of like Felix's Q moment in a sense, because he doesn't
Yeah,
have a Q lab to go to. He is kind of
right,
his own man. So this guy helping him out with this, it's like he doesn't have gadgets. He's a little bit more grounded than Bond because he doesn't clearly have the budget that a double O
right,
would have.
right.
And I
Yeah.
really liked how you incorporated this because it really does give him that personal touch, gadgety kind of moment.
Yes. Well, I found a prosthetics doctor who knew his history of stuff, of what exactly would have been used in the early 1950s. As much, I love Ian Fleming. Don't get me wrong, and I don't think though that he just described Felix's prosthetic as a hook, like a pirate hook.
Right.
And even the Daily Express comic strips, the John McCluskey comic strips, when you see Felix Leiter, it's a pirate hook.
Yeah.
And the thing is that would not have been the case in
No.
1952 for a veteran of a government agency.
Right.
It would have been, the same kind of contraption that Harold Russell had in the movie The Best Years of Our Lives.
I've learned how to take this harness off.
It's what I describe in the book, the whole shoulder harness thing that with a pincher, and
Mm-hmm.
you operate it by flexing your muscles and everything. And
Yeah.
that's what Felix would have had. Why Fleming didn't go there, or maybe he just didn't know, or he just didn't care. He just kind of thought, oh, this is kind of exotic. We'll just give him a hook.
This sounds dangerous. That
Yeah, I
works.
know. I know.
Problem
So
solved.
that's the only thing I kind of I mean, you could say that Felix meant that it was this pincher thing and he just called it a hook,
Right.
because
Right.
people do call it a hook.
Yep.
Even people that have those pincher things call it a hook because
Yep.
it's kind of hook shaped.
Yep.
So
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, did his act like a pincer where it had
yeah,
that curve, but then
yeah,
was
yeah.
there a piece here as well?
No, it's like that.
It's just here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's got that curve. Yeah. So that's a lot. That's very similar to Dr. No's hands
Yeah.
as described in the book, which is weird that he went that far with Dr. No, but not Felix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? Well, moving on, besides some of the gadgets and the fun things of the book, we got to talk about the chemistry of the characters, because we've got some really interesting characters that come into the story. And I got to tell you, I was not ready for the depth of Dora. Is it Wasaki?
Wasaki.
Wasaki. So Dora Wasaki. Love this character. She really does. She puts Felix through the ringer. She absolutely does. But in all of the best ways that you would want for a story like this. So with Felix and Dora, they have an interesting mix of tension, attraction, danger, and that kind of chemistry feels pulled straight out of like a smoky jazz club, kind of like we were talking about that noir, which is perfect.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's the femme fatale. She's a femme fatale.
Right, exactly. So both carry scars, though, physical and emotional, and in some cases moral. Yet they seem to see themselves reflected in each other at times.
Yes.
Were you consciously writing them as two halves of the same coin?
No, I don't think so. I think that just kind of came out.
Okay.
For most of the book, you don't know what she's about.
Right.
She's a cipher. She's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
He's attracted to her because she's good looking, and she's has an air about her that's very enticing and attractive, and
Yes.
Eastern European and all that, and she looks like a very young Patricia Neal.
Yes. Who I looked up, by the way. You have good taste, sir. You have good taste in women.
Well, in the early 50s, this was around the time she was in The Day the Earth Stood Still. So yeah, for that period, yeah, she was attractive. We don't know what her game is, and neither does Felix. And I tried to stretch that out as long as possible to keep it a mystery, what she's up to.
Well, I didn't know if that was something that you consciously went into, like I said, that the two sides of the coin thing, or if that was just something that naturally happened between their relationship as time went on.
I guess it's just naturally happened.
Yeah, because obviously we get to a certain point in the story and there is a coin involved, and so I thought, oh, this is a really fun tactic for anybody who's paying attention, to where it could be that double-sided parallel with the coin. So I didn't know. Maybe
That's interesting. I didn't think of that, but it's an interesting interpretation.
yeah. So speaking of interesting interpretations, um, you took us on a road trip with these two, and this is where her character really kind of starts to unfold, and Felix starts to see some of the holes, if you will, in some of her story and some of the things that she's told him. Now you take us across the American cross country journey from New York to Texas. It gives the story such a different energy than a typical Bond mission. Almost like True Detective meets like a Route 66 kind of a thing. That's what I was picking up.
Yeah.
I know you're a big music lover.
Yeah.
Now, if Felix and Dora had a soundtrack for that road trip, what artists would that mixtape include?
Well, I mean, I do mention a lot of the radio tunes that they
Mm-hmm.
hear along the
Yeah,
way, a lot, quite a
yeah,
lot. So that all that would be in the soundtrack, for
okay.
sure. Um, but early 50s, this was before Elvis. This would have been, big band stuff, still.
Mm-hmm.
And
A lot of
you
jazz.
know, yeah, and Felix was a jazz fan, is a jazz fan. Even Fleming made him a jazz fan, so he knows all the jazz artists. And but you don't hear that stuff on the radio a lot in those days. You wouldn't hear Miles Davis, on regular mainstream AM radio.
Right, right.
Um, so he would probably have a nice vinyl collection uh, of records of jazz records.
Oh yeah.
But as far as the radio, it was the popular hits of the time, that I mentioned. And
Okay.
they were indeed, those songs were in the hit parade at that time. So
RCA Victor, world leader in radio, first in recorded music, and first in television, presents transcribed the Phil Harris Alice Faye Show.
But just remember, darling, all the while you belong to me. See them.
They've stolen the joy from the night. Wish you were here, wish you were here, wish you were here.
I purposefully, put those songs, the music in the book because of all that, because I wanted a musical feel to it. I did that in the Black Stiletto too. All
Mhm.
the contemporary songs are coming out of her radio and things like that. So I'm very aware of what the soundtrack of that story in coming out of the world around them, radios or television or whatever, what that would sound like.
Let's talk about this road trip for just a second, because I love how we do get the two of them just traveling for a while. And what kind of pulled you to push them for that long of a trip together? Was that to kind of open up their dynamic more as kind of
Oh
the
yeah.
main two characters of the film? Isolate them?
If you go on a road trip with somebody, you bond with them. And that just happened with me a few times. Um, they don't know each other well at the beginning, but by the end of the 3-4 days, however long it was, 5 days, um, they know each other pretty well. In fact, they're sleeping with each other.
Right. About as well as you can know each other.
So yeah, I mean that's one way to, you know, because all you can do is talk to each other when you're on a road trip.
Right.
You either sit there silently and listen to the radio, or you talk to each other. And he tries to pull her out. You know, he talks to her. He's a talker. I mean, Felix Leiter talks a lot. He's a gabber, and so he eventually draws her out of her initial shell.
I would agree with that because she's very tight-lipped in the beginning, and as things go on, you do see him kind of crack that shell and get into some of her inner workings, and that's where things start to get very, very interesting. But we're not going to do those types of spoilers here today because I want people to read this book because it really does take you on a solid adventure. This was probably I've read a handful of books over the past few years when it comes to Bond, when it comes to just other things as well, and I can tell you this is probably the best book I've read personally in well over probably 3 or 4 years. Like I've really enjoyed it, man. Like you did such a good job with this. Yeah. Well, and that brings me to my final question because I have to ask you, Raymond. I mean, at this point, obviously, you're seeing success with this book, so we're going to escalate the stakes here a little bit. Felix's strength in this novel comes from his vulnerability, his injuries, his pride, and his moral compass. You see this in the comics as well. I mean, I really noticed that in the comic books, they really they lean into that grit and that darkness of him a lot more. If you were to write a sequel, how would you raise the stakes? How do you keep this damaged man interesting once he's already survived everything without turning him into a superhero?
Well, we don't know if there's going to be another one yet. Um, if I do another one, I would still keep it in Fleming's timeline. I'd probably be a few years later.
Okay. That was a follow-up
So,
question.
yeah. And then, you know, if there was a third one, there would be maybe at the end of Fleming's timeline. Who knows? You know, kind of like what Anthony Horowitz did.
Right. I didn't know if you would use your own timeline.
No, this is conceived and distinctly part of Fleming's timeline.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I love that. I just know that obviously you have your own catalog as well to pull from. So I didn't know if that's something that you would consider down the road.
Well, you know, see, my Bond books took place, you know, 40 years later, 30 years later.
Right.
And so they're not the same characters. I mean, they are, but they're not. I mean, it's a different universe, you know.
It is.
I mean, we don't really talk about it, but in a way, you know, John Gardner's books are their own separate bubble. My books are their own separate bubble. You know, the later books by, you know, Horowitz and everybody else, they're their own separate bubble. You know, Felix and Bond in my books would be in their 80s if they were Fleming's characters. You know, it just wouldn't. It doesn't. So it's like you pick them up from that decade and you just kind of drop them intact in the decade you're writing in. That was kind of the conceit of what we were doing back in the 90s, 80s and 90s and 2000s. Right. Now it's definitely, you can't help but make it a different universe, you know, because it's so far removed from the 1950s and 60s now. So unless you set it, you know, in that time period, and then you can connect it to that series. So that's why I chose to do it this way. I could have done it a modern Felix. I could have done that, but I found this was more interesting. This appealed to me more, and also would have been a lot more fun diving into the research of the 1950s and playing with the music and the cars and you know, and the smoking and the drinking and everything that you kind of can't do now.
Yeah, no, I get
you know?
that. And I love that you included the Studilac. I love
Yeah.
that you included the Packard, the 250. These were, and I do like how this book does insert itself into the existing timeline, because to me, and I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan.
Yeah,
Okay. So
sure.
to me, Star Wars Rogue One is one of the best films in the franchise because
Yes.
of how it inserts itself in the middle of the story, and it is
Yes.
interconnected.
Yes.
And I feel like that is exactly what this does. This
Yeah,
achieves
that was my intention. Yeah. And so if there's a second book, it will do the same,
Perfect.
you know,
Well,
just a
I'm
little
calling
later.
for a second book. Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to see a second book out there, comment below. Let your voice be heard. I want to hear everybody who would like to see a sequel to this, because I know I would love to get my hands on the next one and the next one and even a fourth. If you could pull it off and make it work, I would love to see the storyline evolve, because you really did expand on a character that has been waiting in the wings to really be uncovered.
Well, it would be up to Ian Fleming Publications and whether or not I could get my head around it and actually try to top this book, because I do feel like this was one of my better efforts. So, it would be a challenge to try to do another one.
Right. No, I get that. And I don't want to say that, because I mean, as an artist myself, I mean, I've been writing for years, and I get it. There's times where you're just like, yes, this is gold. How do I follow this up? What do I do with it? So I get it. But I think you're up to the task. I think you've got it in you, my friend.
Well,
I
I appreciate the confidence.
Yes. If anybody out there would like to find the book, Raymond, tell us where they can find it, where they can find you as well.
Well, they can find me just about anywhere. My website is raymondbenson.com. But I'm on Facebook. I have two profiles. I have a personal page, which, it's more everyday stuff. And then I have an author page that just focuses on the books and stuff like that. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram, although I don't use it that much. And I'm even on Threads, and I don't use that much. That's about it. But those are a lot of places.
Okay.
You can get the book if you want the ebook. It's on Amazon, or if you're in America, it's on Amazon. You need a Kindle or Barnes and Noble for a Nook, and there's other outlets too. And if you're in the UK, go straight to ianfleming.com. And they can sell you the ebook as well as the print book. And people in America can order the print book directly from IFP, and they ship it right to you. So
Yes. And that's how I got my copy as well. So definitely check that out. I'll leave links down below for everything he's talking about, guys. And let us know what you think. Did you enjoy the book? Was there something that stood out to you that really spoke to you, and you're excited to see the second adventure of Felix Leiter come out? If so, let us know. Raymond, again, thank you so much for being here. I always enjoy talking to you, my friend.
Oh, well, thank you for having me again, Chris.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Of course. Look forward to having you back anytime. You let me know. We'll make it happen.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, Merry Christmas, 007.
With you.